And should be able to. Maybe. Okay, there we go. So I know nobody will be able to see this except for those that are on the old interwebs, but I started this week off. That's probably why everyone wants to miss because they knew we were having a pop quiz. Uncle Charlie, I want you to name one character out of the Book of Judges. Pick one.
One, what was his name? Just one. My head's blank right now.
Michelle, name one. Really? Not even one? Okay. So I would say Samson is one that jumps to mind. And then,
That's what I was thinking about.
yeah. And then we talk about the approximate time period that the book occurred. It was right after Joshua, when we were exiting out of Egypt. And was it good? Was it a good thing that all of Israel did what was right in their own eyes? Michelle. Good. Why not? Okay. So I'm going to avoid the review. We're in chapter 17 now, but for the last 17 chapters, we've learned about several different people that God set aside specifically for his purpose, not to rule over, but to be there as a judge for the land of Israel. They would essentially fall back into different types of idolatry. They would stay in the idolatrous state, and their surrounding enemies would take them over, and they would cry out to God because they would be in bondage. God would redeem them with a judge, and the judge would essentially get rid of the occupying force. And we've seen that many times. What we finished on last week was with Samson. Samson was a very unique judge. His power came upon him through the Spirit, and we saw that the sign of his covenant was through his hair, and he was very attached to women. Women seemed to be the root of his problems. So that gets us into chapter 17. We will finish the book of Judges today. And following the book of Judges, we will get into 1st and 2nd Kings. So next week we will be in the books of 1st and 2nd Kings. So I'm going to go ahead and get us started. Chapter 17, I will tell you right now, if you're not reading the book in rapid succession, if you're just reading one chapter at a time, chapter 17 doesn't really make much sense, but it ties directly into chapter 18. So just keep that in mind. Chapter 17. Now, there was a man from the mountains of Ephraim whose name was Micah. And he said to his mother, the 1,100 shekels of silver that were taken from you, and on which you put a curse, even saying it in my ears, here is the silver with me. I took it. And his mother said, may you be blessed by the Lord, my son. So when he returned the 1,100 shekels of silver to his mother said, I had wholly dedicated the silver from my hand to the Lord for my son to make a carved image and a molded image. Now, therefore, I will return it to you. Thus, he returned the silver to his mother. Then his mother took 200 shekels of silver and gave them to the silversmith, and he made it into a carved image and a molded image, and they were in the house of Micah. Then, the man Micah had a shrine and made an ephod and a household idols. And he consecrated one of his sons, who became his priest. In those days, there was no king in Israel, and everyone did what was right in his own eyes. So that's kind of our theme that we have going on here. Israel has really fallen far from what God had instructed them. Number one, what was the first commandment? Anyone know the first commandment? Shall have no gods before me. Okay. Yeah, so we're not supposed to make any carved images either. So what's happening in the beginning of this is that there's this guy named Micah. He basically steals money from his mom, 1,100 shekels of silver, but he feels guilty about it because he also recognizes that his mom said openly, whoever stole this money, a curse is on it. So he returns to the money to his mom, and his mom's basically saying, oh, I cursed it because it was supposed to be an inheritance to you. go ahead and take a part of the money and make an idol out of it. So he makes an idol out of it. He then has one of his sons consecrated to be a priest in his house, which when or who of what tribe were supposed to be the priests? Do you remember, babe? We have one in our house. Yes, the Levites. So they're obviously doing everything wrong, but let's continue on. Now, there was a young man from Bethlehem in Judah, of the family of Judah. He was a Levite and was staying there. The man departed from the city of Bethlehem in Judah to stay wherever he could find a place. Then he came to the mountains of Ephraim, to the house of Micah, as he journeyed. And Micah said to him, well, where do you come from? And he said to him, I am a Levite from Bethlehem in Judah, and I am on my way to find a place to stay. And Micah said to him, dwell with me and be a father and a priest to me, and I will give you 10 shekels of silver per year, a suit of clothes, and your sustenance. So the Levi went in. Then the Levi was content to dwell with the man, and the young man became like one of his sons to him. So Micah consecrated the Levite, and the young man became his priest and lived in the house of Micah. Then Micah said, now I know that the Lord will be good to me, since I have a Levite as a priest. So interesting to note here, that's all of chapter 17. But Micah knew that a priest needed to be a Levite. So he entices this priest to become almost like a preacher for hire and says, oh my gosh, if you're a Levite, why don't you just stay with me? I'll pay all your bills and I'll give you a salary to be a priest. And this Levite says, that's a pretty sweet gig. I accept your offer. So that's all of chapter 17. It's a little weird, but we're going to learn more in chapter 18. In those days, again, we see this, there was no king in Israel. And in those days, the tribe of the Danites was seeking an inheritance for itself to dwell in. For unto that day, their inheritance among the tribes of Israel had not fallen to them. So the children of Dan sent 5 men of their family from the territory, men of valor, from Zorah and Eshtaol, to spy out the land and search it. They said to them, go, search the land. So they went to the mountains of Ephraim, to the house of Micah, and lodged there. While they were at the house of Micah, they recognized the voice of the young Levite. They turned aside and said to him, who brought you here? And what are you doing in this place? Why do you have here? Or what do you have here? And he said to them, thus and so Micah did for me. He has hired me, and I have become his priest. So they said to him, please inquire of God, that we may know whether the journey on which we go will be prosperous. And the priest said to them, go in peace, the presence of the Lord be with you on your way. Interesting. Okay, so there's a statement that we hear that comes out of the Bible frequently, and it says, from Dan to Beersheba, all of Israel was with one accord, whatever it may be. What do you think that means, babe, from Dan to Beersheba? What would you say that that's saying? What are they trying to say?
Read it again. Sorry, I was texting.
It's not on here.
Can I say it again? I was letting Isaac know that wasn't coming.
It's a bit complicated. Never mind. Dan would be the absolute most northern part of Israel, the tribe, or of the 12 tribes, and Beersheba would be the most southerly part. So it'd be like saying from California to Maine. Right? That would be the biggest expanse if you were to look at us on the map. Or from, Washington to Florida. It's basically giving this long expanse. But during this time period, Dan didn't have a land. And we're going to learn later on in, history that Dan was one of those tribes that's taken out because they basically served idolatry. And I almost wonder if this is the origin of that. So these 5 members from the tribe of Dan make their way to Ephraim. They meet this Levite who's in the house of Micah. They ask for a blessing. He says that he's a priest for hire and that Micah has treated him well and that go on their way, that they'll do well. So the 5 men departed and went to Laish. They saw the people who were there how they dwelt safely in the manner of the Sidonians, quiet and secure. There were no rulers in the land who might put them out to shame for anything. They were far from the Sidonians, and they had no ties with anyone. Then the spies came back to their brethren at Zorah and Eshtaol, and their brethren said to them, "What is your report?" So they said, "Arise, let us go against them. For we have seen the land, and indeed it is very good. Would you do nothing? Do not hesitate to go and enter and possess the land. When you go, you will come to a secure people and a large land, for God has given it into your hands, a place where there is no lack of anything that is on the earth." And 600 men of the family of the Danites went from there, from Zorah and Eshtaol, armed with weapons of war. Then they went up and encamped in Kirjath Jearim in Judah. Therefore they called that place Mahanath Dan to this day. There it is, west of Kirjath Jearim. And they passed from there to the mountains of Ephraim and came to the house of Micah. Then the 5 men who had gone to spy out the country of Laish answered and said to their brethren, "Do you know that there are in these houses an ephod, household of idols, and a carved image and a molded image? Now therefore consider what you should do." So they turned aside and came to the house of the young Levite man, to the house of Micah, and greeted him. The 600 men armed with their weapons of war, who were of the children of Dan, stood by the entrance of the gate. Then the 5 men who had gone out to spy out the land went up. Entering there, they took the carved image, the ephod, the household idols, and the molded image. The priests stood at the entrance of the gate with the 600 men who were armed with weapons of war. So basically what's happened is that Micah has shown great kindness to these members of the tribe of Dan. And on their way to go conquer this land that is really secluded, that the Sidonian leaders aren't going to send to try and stop them or to create a battle, they decide to take everything that Micah has, all these things that he set aside, molded images and basically their form of idolatry, and their priest. That's what we're going to see what the priest says. Now, when these went into Micah's house and took the carved images, the ephod, the household idols, and the molded images, the priest said to them, "What are you doing?" And they said to him, "Be quiet. Put your hand over your mouth." That was a pretty loud scream. Yeah, "What are you doing?" And they said to him, "Be quiet, put your hand over your mouth, and come with us. Be a father and a priest to us. It is better for you to be a priest to the household, or is it better for you to be a priest to the household of one man, or that you be a priest to a tribe and a family in Israel?" So the priest's heart was glad, and he took the ephod, the household idols, and the carved image, and took his place among the people. And they turned and departed, and put the little ones, the livestock, and the goods in front of them. When they were a good way from the house of Micah, the men who were in the houses near Micah gathered together and overtook the children of Dan. And they called out to the children of Dan, so they turned around and said to Micah, "What ails you that you have gathered such a company?" So he said, "You have taken away my gods, which I made, and the priest, and you have gone away. Now what more do I have? How can you say to me, 'What ails you?'" So Micah feels like he's been really wronged because he set aside all these things. He thinks he's going to be blessed by God by making these molded images and hired a priest. And the priest is really looking at what's best for the priest. Well, yeah, I'll make it 10 shekels of silver a year here, and I could do whatever I want, and he's going to take care of me. Or I could do it for this whole tribe, and I could still have all these idols and things like that. So the children of Dan respond to Micah, "Do not let your voice be heard among us, lest angry men fall upon you, and you lose your life, with the lives of your household." Then the children of Dan went their way, and when Micah saw that they were too strong for him, he turned and went back to his house. So they took the things that Micah had, and the priest who had belonged to him, and went to Laish, to a people quiet and secure, and they struck them with the edge of the sword and burned the city with fire. There was no deliverer. because it was far from Sidon. Remember, this is the Sidonians. And they had no ties with anyone. It was in the valley that belongs to Beth Rehob. So they rebuilt the city and dwelt there, and they called the name of the city Dan, and after the name of Dan, their father, who was born to Israel. However, the name of the city formerly was Laish. Then the children of Dan set up for themselves the carved image, and Jonathan, the son of Gershom, the son of Manasseh, and his sons were priests to the tribe of Dan until the day of the captivity of the land. So they set up for themselves Micah's carved image, which he made, all the time that the house of God was in Shiloh. So, a little bit of an interesting story there, right? The Danites didn't have their set-aside land, which is kind of crazy because Moses gave specific instructions that they were supposed to go out and conquer these lands. And then Joshua led out all these military skirmishes to make sure everyone had land. And Dan was really like the last man out there. But it's interesting to note that Dan was still going after idols, and how much the priestly role had deteriorated. But again, they were doing whatever was right in their own eyes, not what was the instruction that came from God. So that gets us into chapter 19. And it came to pass in those days when there was no king in Israel, that there was a certain Levite staying in the remote mountains of Ephraim. He took for himself a concubine from Bethlehem in Judah. But his concubine played the harlot against him and went away from him to her father's house at Bethlehem in Judah and was there 4 whole months. So I'm going to let you guys know, this is a very gruesome and sick event that's about to take place. And it's going to cover these 2 chapters. But basically, when do we know of a Levite taking a concubine, right? That's not par for the course. But we also see that he's staying in the remote mountains of Ephraim. So I don't know if that has any tie with the last Levite that was there, but we see that he took himself a concubine. The girl was from Bethlehem. She decided to cheat on him and went back to her father's house and was in her father's house for 4 months. And we see then her husband arose and went after her to speak kindly to her and bring her back, having a servant and a couple of donkeys with him. So he brought him to her father's house, and when the father of the young woman saw him, he was glad to meet him. Now his father-in-law, the young woman's father, detained him, and he stayed with him 3 days. So they ate and drank and lodged there. Then it came to pass on the 4th day that they arose early in the morning, and he stood up to depart. But the young woman's father said to his son-in-law, refresh your heart with a morsel of bread, and afterward you may go on your way. So they sat down, and the 2 of them ate and drank together. Then the young woman's father said to the man, please be content to stay all night, and let your heart be merry. And when the man stood to depart, his father-in-law urged him, so he lodged there again. So this is, he really likes him. And honestly, like from what we've heard thus far, he sounds like a very reasonable man. His concubine, which is, his sexual partner, who is supposed to be tied to him forever, right, has went and played the harlot with another man, and she's been hiding at her dad's house. And he goes down there and is speaking kindly to her because he wants her to come back with him. So they're basically, having a peace meal with each other. And the father-in-law really likes the guy and keeps him for 3 nights. And then on the 4th day, when he gets to rise, he goes, no, don't go yet. Let me get you food. Let me go. He is being a great host. So now we're on the 4th day. Then he arose early in the morning on the 5th day to depart. But the young woman's father said, please refresh your heart. So they delayed until afternoon, and both of them ate. And when the man stood to depart, he and his concubine and his servant, his father-in-law, the young woman's father said to him, look, the day is now drawing toward evening. Please spend the night. See, the day is coming to an end. Lodge here, that your heart may be merry. Tomorrow go on your way. so that you may go home. However, the man was not willing to spend that night. So he arose and departed and came opposite of Jebus, that is Jerusalem. With him were the 2 saddled donkeys. His concubine was also with him. They were near Jerusalem, and the day was far spent. And the servant said to his master, "Come, please, and let us turn aside into the city of the Jebusites, and we will lodge in it." But his master said to him, "We will not turn aside here into a city of foreigners who are not of the children of Israel. We will go on to Gibeah." So this guy has now spent 5 days with this woman's father, with his father-in-law. Her father-in-law was trying to detain him to stay 1 more day, and then he could leave early in the morning, but this guy's ready to go home. So they're leaving in the afternoon, but they can't go very far because obviously you don't travel at nighttime during these times. So the servant that's with him, it's the man, his concubine, and his servant, and the 2 donkeys, okay? So he is saying, let's just stop here, but the man is saying, absolutely not. It would be better if we stayed with our own people. It's better to stay with the children of Israel. These are our brothers. So he said to his servant, "Come, let us draw near to one of these places and spend the night in Gibeah or Ramah." And they passed by and went on their way, and the sun went down on them near Gibeah, which belongs to Benjamin. They turned aside there to go into lodge in Gibeah. And when he went in, he sat down in the open square of the city, for no one would take them into his house to spend the night. So that's a very interesting statement, because all of the scholars that I had listened to had mentioned that this culture would always take someone in, and their behavior was reflective of that individual who her father-in-law was. Come dine with us, come stay in our house, come do this, we're going to provide food for you, and we're going to do this, and we're going to do that. But in this particular area, which is his own flesh and blood, they're saying no. Hang on real quick, Uncle Charlie. Okay, so now he's out in the open square. And as he's out there in the open square, ready to spend the night, just basically sitting out in the middle of the city, an old man came in from his work in the field in the evening, who was from the mountains of Ephraim. He was staying in Gibeah, whereas the man of the place were Benjamites. So we see someone similar here, because this guy's also from the same area, but he's working in the fields down there. And when he raised his eyes, he saw the traveler in the open square of the city. And the old man said, "Where are you going? And where do you come from?" So he said to him, "We are passing from Bethlehem in Judah towards the remote mountains of Ephraim. I am from there. I went to Bethlehem in Judah. Now I am going to the house of the Lord. But there is no one who will take me into his house, although we have both straw and fodder for our donkeys, and bread and wine for myself, for your female servant, and for the young man who is with your servant. There is no lack of anything." And the old man said, "Peace be with you. However, let all your needs be my responsibility. Only do not spend the night in the open square." So he brought him into his house and gave fodder to the donkeys, and they washed their feet and ate and drank. So what a great guy. You want to talk about a host, the hostess with the mostest, right? He goes, "Absolutely not. Don't worry about feeding your donkeys or bread and wine for you, your servant, and your concubine. But I'll take care of all your needs. Just don't stay out in the center of the city." Moving on. And as they were enjoying themselves, suddenly certain men of the city, perverted men, surrounded the house and beat on the door. They spoke to the master of the house, the old man, saying, bring out the man who came to your house, that we may know him carnally. So now the Benjamites are trying to rape this guy. But the man, the master of the house, went out to them and said to them, no, my brethren, I beg you, do not act so wickedly. Seeing this man has come into my house, do not commit this outrage. Look, here is my virgin daughter and the man's concubine. Let me bring them out now, humble them, and do with them as you please. But to this man, do not do such a vile thing. But the men would not heed him. So the man took his concubine and brought her out to them. And they knew her and abused her all night until morning. And when the day began to break, they let her go. So this just a terrible situation here. Huh? Yeah. Basically all the men, the Benjamite men of the town, took a turn at her, raping her. And they were going to go after him, the guy. So this is horrible. Then the woman came as the day was dawning and fell down at the door of the man's house where his master was till it was light. And when the master arose in the morning and opened the doors, he went out to go his way, and there was his concubine, fallen at the door of the house with her hands on the threshold. And he said to her, get up and let us be going. But there was no answer. So the man lifted her up onto the donkey, and the man got up and went to his place. And when he entered his house, this is where it gets kind of wild. He took a knife, laid hold of his concubine, and divided her into 12 pieces, limb by limb. Go upstairs, guys. Now. Thank you. Go, Luke. Go. So he finds out that she's dead. He puts her on the back of his donkey, carries her all the way back to her house, his house, and he cuts her into 12 pieces. Okay? So she's all chopped up. Well, listen to what he does. And when he entered his house, he took a knife and laid hold of his concubine and divided her into 12 pieces, limb by limb, and sent her throughout all the territory of Israel. And so it was that all who saw it said, no such deed has been done or seen from the day that the children of Israel came up from the land of Egypt until this day. Consider it, confer, and speak up. So he sends a message to all the leaders in Israel. This is what's going on right now. And so imagine that you're on the receiving end. You're in the tribe of Judah, and a leg shows up to your doorstep with a note about what happened. All of the tribes were on the same page. Like, this is something that we haven't heard about since how bad Egypt was. What is happening here? It's like you're getting ready to go to war against an enemy. So we see here, chapter 20. So all the children of Israel came out from Dan to Beersheba. What do you think that means, Michelle? From Dan to Beersheba.
From California to Maine.
Okay.
Cross.
Okay. So basically all of Israel gathered together, as well as the land of Gilead, and the congregation gathered together as one man before the Lord at Mizpah. And the leaders of all the people, all the tribes of Israel, presented themselves in the assembly of the people of God. 400,000 foot soldiers who drew the sword. Now the children of Benjamin heard that the children of Israel had gone up to Mizpah. Then the children of Israel said, tell us, how did this wicked deed happen? So the Levite, the husband of the woman who was murdered, answered and said, my concubine and I went into Gibeah, which belongs to Benjamin, to spend the night. And the men of Gibeah rose against me and surrounded the house at night because of me. They intended to kill me, but instead they ravished my concubine so that she died. So I took hold of my concubine, cut her in pieces, and sent her throughout all the territory of the inheritance of Israel, because they committed lewdness and an outrage in Israel. Look, All of you children of Israel, give your advice and counsel here and now. I think it's a pretty fair request what he's asking. This is what happened. What do you guys think we should do? Because essentially what's not happening right here is nobody's consulting with God, right? But now we're going to read what their response was, which again seems fairly appropriate considering. So all the people, as one man, saying, none of us will go to his tent, nor will any turn back to his house. But now this is the thing which we will do to Gibeah. We will go up against it by lot. We will take 10 men out of every 100 throughout all the tribes of Israel, 100 out of every 1,000, and 1,000 out of every 10,000, to make provisions for the people, that when they come to Gibeah in Benjamin, they may repay all the vileness that has been done in Israel. So all the men of Israel were gathered against the city, united together as one man. Then the tribes of Israel sent men through all the tribe of Benjamin, saying, what is this wickedness that has occurred among you? Now, therefore, deliver up the men, the perverted men who are in Gibeah, that we may put them to death and remove the evil from Israel. That seems like a pretty fair request. Wouldn't you guys agree? All the men who are guilty of this crime, of raping this woman to death, send them out so we can kill them and cleanse our nation from this perversion. But the children of Benjamin would not listen to the voice of their brethren, the children of Israel. Instead, the children of Benjamin gathered together from their cities to Gibeah to go to battle against the children of Israel. Well, what do we know about the children of Benjamin? Do you remember the guy who used his left hand with the sword? Remember we talked about the Benjamites? They were skilled warriors, right? So, number one, they're very prideful in this instance too. I'm really surprised by their response, to be honest with you, but it just goes to show you how far the nation had fallen. I see it happening today. I really do. There's not enough parents going into the public schools that are unhappy with what's going on. They're just letting it happen. And there needs to be more of those people standing up. So anyways, the tribe of Benjamin refuses to repent from what they're doing. They're not willing to give up the guys, and they're going to gather their people together against their own brethren. So, and from their cities, at that time, the children of Benjamin numbered 26,000 men who drew the sword, besides the inhabitants of Gibeah, who numbered 700 select men. Among all this people were 700 select men who were left-handed. Everyone could sling a stone at a hair's breadth and not miss. So think about that. They were skilled warriors. They were accurate enough to hit the bullseye every single time. Now, besides Benjamin, the men of Israel numbered 400,000 men who drew the sword. All of these were men of war. Then the children of Israel arose and went up to the house of God to inquire of God. They said, which of us shall go up first to battle against the children of Benjamin? The Lord said, Judah first. So the children of Israel rose in the morning and encamped against Gibeah, and the men of Israel went out to battle against Benjamin. And the men of Israel put themselves in battle array to fight against them at Gibeah. Then the children of Benjamin came out of Gibeah, and on that day cut down to the ground 22,000 men of the Israelites. And the people, that is, the men of Israel, encouraged themselves and again formed the battle line at the place where they had put themselves in array on the first day. Then the children of Israel went up and wept before the Lord until evening, and asked counsel of the Lord, saying, shall I again draw near for battle against the children of my brother Benjamin? And the Lord said, go up against him. So the children of Israel approached the children of Benjamin on the second day. And Benjamin went out against them from Gibeah on the second day and cut down the ground 18,000 men, 18,000 more of the children of Israel that drew the sword. So this is kind of crazy. They're way outnumbered. Benjamin's way outnumbered, but their guys are so skilled and so talented that they are just wiping out the remaining Israelites. So, I mean, we talked about 400,000 to 22,000, and they pulled thousands of the tribe members, so on and so forth. So we're now into the third day. And all the children of Israel, that is, all the people went up and came to the house of the Lord and wept. They sat there before the Lord and fasted that day until evening. And they offered burnt offerings and peace offerings before the Lord. So the children of Israel inquired of the Lord. The ark of the covenant of God was there in those days, and Phinehas, the son of Eleazar, the son of Aaron, stood before in those days, saying, shall I yet again go out to battle against the children of my brother Benjamin, or shall I cease? And the Lord said, go up, for tomorrow I will deliver them into your hand. Then Israel set men in ambush around all of Gibeah. And the children of Israel went up against the children of Benjamin on the third day and put themselves in battle array against Gibeah as at other times. So the children of Benjamin went out against the people and were drawn away from the city. They began to strike down and kill some of the people, as at other times, in the highways, one of which goes up to Bethel and the other to Gibeah. And in the field, about 30 men. And the children of Benjamin said, they are defeated before us, just as at first. But the children of Israel said, let us flee and draw them away from the city to the highways. So all the men of Israel rose from their place and put in battle array at Baal Tamar. Then Israel's men in ambush burst forth from their position in the plain of Geba, and 10,000 select men from all Israel came against Gibeah, and the battle was fierce, but the Benjamites did not know that the disaster was upon them. The Lord defeated Benjamin before Israel, and the children of Israel destroyed that day 25,100 Benjamites. All these drew the sword. So the children of Benjamin saw that they were defeated. The men of Israel had been given ground to the Benjamites because they relied on the men in ambush who they had set against Gibeah. And the men in ambush quickly rushed upon Gibeah. The men in ambush spread out and struck the whole city with the edge of the sword. Now the appointed signal between the men of Israel and the men in ambush was that they would make a great cloud of smoke rise up from the city, whereupon the men of Israel would turn into battle. Now Benjamin had begun to strike and kill about 30 of the men in Israel, for they said, surely they are defeated before us, as in the first battle. But when the cloud began to rise from the city in a column of smoke, the Benjamites looked behind them, and there was the whole city going up in smoke to heaven. And when the men of Israel turned back, the men of Benjamin panicked, for they saw that disaster had come upon them. Therefore they turned their backs before the men of Israel in the direction of the wilderness. But the battle overtook them, and whoever came out of the cities, they destroyed in their midst. They surrounded the Benjamites, chased them, and easily trampled them down as far as the front of Gibeah towards the east. And 18,000 men of Benjamin fell. All these were men of valor. So, I'll keep going. Then they turned and fled toward the wilderness of the rock of Rimmon, and they cut down 5,000 of them on the highways, and they pushed them relentlessly up to Gidom and killed 2,000 of them. So all who fell of Benjamin that day were 25,000 men who drew the sword. All these were men of valor, but 600 men turned and fled toward the wilderness to the rock of Rimmon, and they stayed at the rock of Rimmon for 4 months. And the men of Israel turned back against the children of Benjamin and struck them down with the edge of the sword from every city, men and beasts, all who were found. They also set fire to all the cities that they came to. Now the men of Israel had sworn an oath at Mizpah, saying, none of us shall give his daughter to Benjamin as a wife. Then the people came to the house of God and remained there before God till evening. They lifted up their voices and wept bitterly and said, O Lord God of Israel, why has this come to pass in Israel that today there should be one tribe missing in Israel? So this is insane to me, but I get it. Okay. God promised them this land, and he promised it to these 12 tribes. And these people are so cognizant of what God's promises were that they recognize that they're going to wipe out an entire tribe. They killed all the men that did all these bad things, supposedly. That's what we would perceive, the 25,000 dropped dead. And they've attacked them. They've wiped out their women and children. There's all that we know of is that there's only 600 men that are hiding behind this rock at Mizpah, okay, or the rock of Rimmon. And so now the men of Israel are mourning because one of their brothers, one of their tribes is gone. So it was on the next morning that the people rose early and built an altar there, and they offered burnt offerings and peace offerings. The children of Israel said, "Who is there among all the tribes of Israel who did not come up with the assembly of the Lord?" For they had made a great oath concerning anyone who had not come up to the Lord at Mizpah, saying, "He shall surely be put to death." And the children of Israel grieved for Benjamin their brother and said, "One tribe is cut off from Israel today. What shall we do for wives for those who remain, seeing we have sworn by the Lord that we will not give them our daughters as wives?" So this is kind of crazy. Okay? These guys recognize that they made an oath at Mizpah saying that they would not give their daughters, that they would not do this. And they recognize all the people who showed up as tribe members were under oath to do these things. Okay? And it seems as if there's no hope left for Benjamin because all the women and children have been killed. All the men of the tribe have been killed, except for these select few warriors that are hiding out behind this rock. So now they're looking for a loophole in their oath. And it's interesting that when they make these oaths, even when they're doing things that it's right in their own eyes, they still feel a bondage to the oath, just like that one guy who slaughtered his daughter because he made an oath, which obviously we all know was a mistake. But so they said they're looking to see if there was anyone who didn't make the oath. And they said, "What one is there from the tribes of Israel who did not come up to Mizpah to the Lord?" And in fact, no one had come from the camp of Jabesh Gilead to the assembly, for when the people were counted, indeed, not one of the inhabitants of Jabesh Gilead was there. So the congregation sent out their 12,000 of their most valiant men and commanded them, saying, "Go and strike the inhabitants of Jabesh Gilead with the edge of the sword, including the women and children. And this is the thing that you shall do. You shall utterly destroy every male and every woman who has known a man intimately." So they found among the inhabitants of Jabesh Gilead 400 young virgins who had not known a man intimately, and they brought them to the camp at Shiloh, which is in the land of Canaan. So they're penalizing one of the tribes that didn't show up to battle. They're cutting off the men and the women and the children, with exception of the virgin women. They bring them captive. Okay? And they brought them to the camp of Shiloh, which is in the land of Canaan. Then the whole congregation sent word to the children of Benjamin who were at the rock of Rimmon and announced peace to them. So Benjamin came back at that time, and they gave them the women who they had saved alive of the women of Jabesh Gilead. And yet they had not found enough for them. And the people grieved for Benjamin because the Lord had made a void in the tribes of Israel. Then the elders of the congregation said, "What shall we do for wives for those who remain, since the women of Benjamin have been destroyed?" So there was 600 men at the rock. There was only 400 women that they got out of Jabesh Gilead, so there's a deficit. And they know they won't be able to repopulate the tribe without enough women. So, and they said, "There must be an inheritance for the survivors of Benjamin, that a tribe may not be destroyed from Israel. However, we cannot give them wives from our daughters, for the children of Israel have sworn an oath, saying, 'Cursed be the one who gives a wife to Benjamin.'" So they recognize they have this oath. They have no way to go back on it. Then they said, "In fact, there is a yearly feast of the Lord in Shiloh, which is north of Bethel, on the east side of the highway that goes up from Bethel to Shechem and south of Lebanon." Therefore, they instructed the children of Benjamin, saying, "Go lie in wait in the vineyards and watch. And just when the daughters of Shiloh come out to perform their dances, then come out of the vineyards, and every man catch a wife for himself from the daughters of Shiloh. Then go to the land of Benjamin. Then it shall be when their fathers or their brothers come to us to complain, that we will say to them, be kind to them for our sakes, because we did not take a wife for them in the war. For it is not as though you have given the women to them at this time, making yourselves guilty of your oath. And the children of Benjamin did so. They took enough wives for their number of those from those who danced, whom they caught. Then they went and returned to their inheritance, and they rebuilt the cities and dwelt in them. So the children of Israel departed from there at that time, every man to his tribe and his family, and they went out from there, every man to his inheritance. In those days there was no king in Israel, and everyone did what was right in his own eyes. Now we're going to learn what we've already learned. We've already covered the book, is that the first king of Israel is King Saul, which the word Saul means something great, big, tall, and he's a foot taller than everybody else, but we know that he's a Benjamite. Okay, I never knew this about the Benjamite tribe because I've never read this book of Judges before. And so when he says, I am a Benjamite, the least of the tribes, well, yeah, he's the least of the tribes because they got slaughtered for their wicked deeds that they did. So it makes a ton of sense, that statement now that he makes. I never understood it before. So for the next series that we're getting into, we're going to do in succession, is 1 Kings and 2 Kings. And it's going to cover now from the Judges to the Kings. But for whatever reason, I don't think Saul's in there. I think it begins with David's son Solomon. It talks about when David dies and then his son Solomon takes over. And that's when it records the Kings. So that's all I have for you guys for today on the book of Judges. It was a bit of a gruesome last chapter, but